Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're focusing on a nation that is, well, really caught between two massive forces,
Right. You have this intense external military pressure on one side.
and this profound internal instability on the other. So our mission today is to really analyze the immediate context around this massive and very visible military buildup near Venezuela.
And we want to look at the tension that results from that on the ground, in Caracas specifically.
Exactly. We've synthesized a lot of material reports, official statements, personal accounts that detail a really short, sharp period of high alert.
It gives us a crucial snapshot, of what happens when that kind of geopolitical brinkmanship meets the reality of day-to-day survival.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And the source material is compelling because it forces you to hold two very different narratives in your head at the same time.
Okay, what are those?
Well, on one hand, you have these incredibly aggressive warnings coming from the U.S. We're talking about closing Venezuelan airspace, about imminent ground operations.
And then right up against that.
You have the daily, almost desperate reality for the Venezuelan people. And of course, the very polarized political responses from the leadership there. So this deep dive really requires a careful unpacking of all those contradictions.
So the flashpoint, the thing that really kicked all this off,
Yeah.
was a series of very direct, very explicit warnings from the U.S. president.
Right. And this wasn't some leaked memo or off-the-record comment.
No, not at all. These were public declarations made through his, let's say, preferred communication channels, focusing on alleged drug running through the Caribbean.
He actually said, and I think this is a direct quote, that land operations will begin soon.
Against suspected Venezuelan drug traffickers, yeah. I mean, that sets a pretty serious tone for everything that followed. It led to a massive and immediate military positioning.
The statements alone were enough to just rocket the tensions up. But the speed with which that rhetoric was backed up by actual physical force.
That's the key.
That's the most significant part. It signaled this was way beyond just diplomacy.
Absolutely. So for you listening, our mission today is to move through three distinct but interlocking layers of this crisis. First, we need to really quantify the true scale of this external military threat.
Then we're going to immerse ourselves in the daily reality for people living in Caracas. A world away from the halls of power.
And finally, we'll analyze the deeply polarized political responses coming from both the city government and, of course, the domestic opposition.
Okay, let's get into it.
So let's start by defining the sheer scale of that external pressure. Because hearing about, airspace closures is one thing, but the actual military deployment tells the real story. The threat was specific. Close the airspace and, again, that, quote, land operations will begin soon.
And that immediately signals that the U.S. wasn't just thinking about a naval blockade or maybe heightened surveillance.
Right.
It suggested a readiness for direct intervention, even if they framed it as just, counter-narcotics operations.
And when you look at the resources they put in place, the threat becomes very, very concrete.
It really does. I mean, we are talking about 15,000 U.S. soldiers suddenly positioned in the region.
15,000.
That size of a force provides capability for massive logistical support or, direct deployment. It's something Caracas simply cannot ignore.
And it wasn't just troops. The naval presence was a huge display of power. The sources confirm 15 U.S. naval vessels were positioned just off the Venezuelan coast.
And we're not just talking about a group of smaller frigates or something.
No.
That fleet included the United States' largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford.
And just to give you a sense of scale on that, a single vessel like that,
Yeah.
what can it carry?
It has the capacity to carry up to 90 planes, fighters, surveillance aircraft, support aircraft. You begin to understand the immense strategic capability that's just parked nearby.
And the location matters, too. The reports say U.S. warships appear to be gearing up specifically off the coast of Puerto Rico. What's the significance of that?
It's all about strategic proximity and readiness. You're positioning a fleet of that size, led by a supercarrier, just outside the immediate zone.
They're close enough.
But still close enough to strike very, very quickly. It achieves the maximum deterrent effect while, let's say, minimizing the immediate international legal headaches.
So it wasn't a subtle signal.
Oh, not at all. This was a loud, visible commitment of power. It was designed to exert the maximum possible psychological and political pressure on the Maduro government.
Okay, so we've established this immense military pressure waiting just offshore. A powerful display of steel and manpower.
A huge display.
But those metal hulls, they don't capture the real pressure felt inside the country. So let's zoom in a bit, shift our focus from the military hardware to the daily experience of civilians.
Yeah.
How did people in Caracas respond to these direct threats?
The human response that the reports detail is this profound mix. It's existential fear on one side, but also just the absolute necessity of routine on the other.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. The constant looming uncertainty is described as making people weary. It's a draining psychological state where you're just forced to compartmentalize everything.
And the specific accounts from civilians really illustrate that grim paradox.
Yeah.
We have people confirming, and this is a quote, "We are all afraid, but we must continue with our lives."
It's an act of sheer will.
It has to be. The need to survive just overrides everything else, forcing people to, as they say, act like nothing is happening just to keep their families moving forward.
And they describe living in this perpetual state of what they call tense calm.
Tense calm.
Yeah. Residents know intellectually that something could happen, but you don't know when. And that state of constant anticipation with no clear timeline, no action you can take, it's a huge psychological burden.
I mean, can you imagine going to work every day knowing there's a vast military force poised just offshore?
But your primary concern is still whether you can find enough cash for groceries for that night.
Yeah. And the effects are so personal. We see evidence that the overall state of tension, plus the real danger of travel with the airspace issues, is leading to painful family separation.
Oh, absolutely.
Parents in Venezuela are only able to see their children who've emigrated through, what, video check-ins? Geopolitics is literally pulling families apart.
And that isolation is just compounded by an economic reality that honestly dwarfs the military threat in terms of its daily impact.
Right. So that raises the question, what's actually driving daily life beneath all this tension?
The sources are crystal clear on this. For most people, the main issue is survival. It's the economy.
Survival driven by just incredibly meager means. The reports confirm that public sector salaries are down to around $4 or $5 a month.
$4 or $5 a month, exactly. When your entire monthly salary covers less than a day's worth of basic needs in many other countries, well, the need to find other work is absolute.
It's not a choice.
No. That is why millions are forced to go out and work to survive. The military invasion is an abstract fear. It's a headline. But not being able to feed your family, that is a daily, visceral crisis.
So that leads to a really critical strategic question. If the average person's focus is just surviving on $5 a month, how does a government maintain political control?
Or even mobilize its citizens.
Yeah, when their most immediate needs are purely economic. Does this external threat, however severe it is, actually serve as a strategic distraction from the poverty at home?
It creates this fascinating political tightrope walk. The government has to be seen addressing the external threat because it's so visible. But internally, they know the population cares way more about hyperinflation and the lack of basic resources.
So they can use it.
The external threat allows the government to invoke nationalism, unity. But it doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't solve the core economic decay that fuels all the internal dissent.
Okay, so let's look at how the official government is actually responding. We have the military threat outside, the desperate economic struggle inside. How is the government, led by Nicolas Maduro, trying to navigate this?
Well, Maduro's response is a classic example of strategic duality. He's playing two contradictory roles at the same time.
Okay, so on one hand,
He says he's willing to engage in face-to-face dialogue with the U.S. president. He tries to frame this as coming from a desire for peace. He even said publicly, "Peace will be my haven, my greatest desire."
that's the diplomatic phase.
Exactly. Aimed at looking reasonable to the international community.
But that sentiment is immediately undercut by this aggressive nationalistic rhetoric. He's signaling he's not weak.
Precisely. At the very same time, he's stressing that Venezuela is prepared to defend itself. He uses the threat to claim the moral high ground, saying the U.S. seeks to rule the world with weapons and threats and to bomb and invade.
So if peace is his greatest desire, why use such strong, aggressive language? Who is that message for? Is it for the U.S. or is it for his domestic audience?
The domestic audience is absolutely key here. By framing the U.S. pressure as an existential threat to the homeland, Maduro is trying to unify the population, or at least his loyalists.
A rally around the flag effect.
Right. He counters the image of U.S. military might by claiming that Venezuela has a determinate people with remarkably popular military and police united and ready to defend the country. It's a powerful call for collective defense designed to override all those internal fractures.
And that unity narrative, well, it gets immediately complicated by the fact that there is a very vocal internal opposition.
A very vocal one.
And the sources say that this opposition is, in large part, welcoming what many of them see as the U.S. attempt at regime change.
And that creates an incredibly volatile environment. The external threat, which in theory should unite all citizens, is instead seen by a huge political faction as a desirable catalyst for internal change.
So while the government's fighting off foreign ships, it's also fighting the reality that some of its own opponents might actually prefer foreign intervention.
They'd prefer it to the status quo, yes.
This tension, it brings us to a really critical part of the civilian experience here. And that's an immense difficulty of even talking about the conflict openly.
Yeah.
Why is political discussion so stringently avoided, even when the threat of an invasion seems so imminent?
You have to remember the timeline. This atmosphere of oppression, the fear of jail, it's pervasive because the current political system has been in place for nearly 3 decades.
So people know the rules.
People know the rules. They understand that the price of dissent isn't just losing a debate. It can be imprisonment or worse.
And the practical consequences of the military posture outside actually feed into this internal repression. The sources say millions of people can't travel because of the airspace threat.
Which further isolates them, further restricts contact with the outside world, and silences those who might speak out.
The level of fear is described as palpable. Reporters on the ground, they note that people actively avoid talking about politics, even to the journalist.
And that speaks volumes, right, about the level of surveillance and the assumed risk of any political conversation. It's a self-imposed silence, and it's driven purely by survival.
We have specific data that shows how severe this crackdown is. The sources document more than 800 arrests for political issues in this climate.
800! That's a staggering number.
It suggests that even while they're focused on the external threat, the state is still keenly focused on silencing opposition at home.
And the media landscape is just crippled, which removes the eyes and ears that might otherwise document what's happening. More than 30 journalists are in jail.
And how many have left?
Somewhere between 100 and 200 journalists have left the country entirely just for trying to report critically on politics. It makes an open, transparent conversation about any of this virtually impossible inside the country.
And beyond that, political organization is just severely constrained. We see these high-profile examples, like the opposition leader Maria Machal, who's described as being in clandestinity.
Right. Or election results that have just been unreleased. Candidates forced to leave the country.
This isn't just a tough political environment. It's one where legitimate political expression has been, for all intents and purposes, criminalized.
And that is the ultimate synthesis of this deep dive. The population is living under this dual threat. The very real, visible risk of external military action.
And the ever-present guaranteed risk of internal state repression if they speak out.
So in that context, silence and just focusing purely on economic survival, they become the only safe, the only rational choices.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener? We've painted a picture here of just extraordinarily high stakes.
It's a pressure cooker.
It really is. You have a major military presence waiting offshore with the USS Gerald Ford, thousands of troops, ready for whatever comes next. You have a government that says it's ready to negotiate but is also prepared to fight.
And then, most critically,
you have a desperate population whose main focus is just survival on public salaries of $4 or $5 a month, all living under this severe climate of political fear where speaking out could mean immediate imprisonment.
And this raises a final really important question for you to consider long after this deep dive is over.
Yeah.
Given that the Venezuelan population's main preoccupation is this struggle for survival on these impossibly low wages, how does this high level of external military and diplomatic tension, which is focused on regime change and drug trafficking, how does that impact or distract from, or maybe even deepen, the core economic and humanitarian crisis that truly defines the daily lives of most Venezuelans?
Does the external pressure offer a real path to change?
Or does it merely provide a useful and very dangerous narrative for the existing regime to sustain itself?